in the theme of the previous year, the discourse that we're learning is stating that the whole point of Chassidus in terms of its practical application is to bring about the refinement of the character and not just control, but even transformation of one's natural disposition. So I'm going to share with you a story that my father may be well, which only came to light to us many years later. We weren't aware of. What's the story? So very briefly. So in Melbourne, this is still the practice that Rabbi would send from New York, 6 Talmidim, 6 students to the Yeshiva Gadol of Melbourne, who served as mentors and teachers and so on for the students. And in general, they brought about over the years a transformation to the entire community. So one year, one of the students, his name is Rabbi Levi Weinbaum. Rabbi Levi Weinbaum today is a shliach in Johannesburg, South Africa. Just want to tell you a little bit about who he is. He's a tremendous scholar, big Talmud Chacham, and rabbi and teacher and mentor and so on. And so he was one of the Bochrim then sent on shlichus for 2 years to Australia. So make the story brief, but it's really Rabbi's elaboration. So he writes a letter to his father. His father, Rabbi Yosef, let's say Weinberg, I'm sorry. Rabbi Yosef Weinberg is a famous personality in Lubavitch. He used to give a shir on the New York radio on Tanya, and he would give every Saturday night, Motzei Shabbos, and he'd also in the later years give over synopsis of the Rebbe's Farbrengen of that day. He was also a roving ambassador of Chabad that traveled all over the world, raising money for the Lubavitch Yeshiva. Rabbi Yosef Weinberg was a noted personality, himself a great scholar. So the son Levi is a shliach habocher in Melbourne, Australia, and he sent his father a long letter one year when he was there. This was in the late 70s, describing the work that they like, what they were doing in Melbourne. All the things that the students, the shluchim, the 6 students accomplished in terms of teaching and over Yontef and Sukkot, the various campaigns, the Lulav and Esrog reaching out to Jews, and the Jews should make a blessing, Lulav and Esrog, and all the programs they did, etc. A very long letter describing what they were doing. And I have to tell you that the 6 students, them and the previous groups and the groups that followed, they effected literally a complete revolution in Melbourne. I am a product of these students. So the first set, the subsequent sets, and many other boys like me, we became what we were, Lubavitch, Chassidim, Shluchim, as a result, not so much of the venerable elder Chassidim, but of these American boys who came here and befriended us and mentored us and taught us and inspired us and so on. That's a story for itself. They changed the landscape. So this is Levi Weinberg. So he's writing to his father a long letter about how Tishrei went in Melbourne. Now in the letter, he also writes the following incident. It was a Shoshone in Shul. And in yeshiva there in Melbourne, this is still a practice in many synagogues. They auction off the aliyahs and the various honors of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. This is one of the main fundraising, not the main fundraising vehicle for the shul, is selling the aliyahs and selling who opens the ark and closes it, and not only, mind you, for Rosh Hashanah Kippur, but like for the whole year. This person has the schus for psicha, raising the Torah and the aliyahs. So he writes, he's sitting there in shul, Rosh Hashanah, and he's feeling very lonely. I can't begin to, I'm not going to try and describe what it's like Rosh Hashanah by the Rebbe, and here he is down in Melbourne, Australia. It's like a different planet, a different world. Rosh Hashanah by the Rebbe. And then starts this bargaining business, a whole auction. I remember it rings in my ears by the guy, what's the patch and the bima and this bank. Zweimal, 2 times high, and it's okay. It's an auction. People raise their hands, and this one, and then he bought it, and this. But there was such a thing that happened. It's an auction aliyahs, and like this was like the straw on the camel's back. He's feeling so lonely and distant and so uninspired by the whole scene, and on top of it all, in the auction in the middle of davening, which he knows it's done, but he never experienced it, and this was like the straw on the camel's back in terms of feeling so disconnected. And he writes to his father, so the auction of one of the aliyahs, and it's Mendel knew it's my father who's bidding, upping the bid. I don't remember the amount. It was a considerable amount in those days. And he buys the aliyah. Who's the aliyah going to? He said, Mr. Hanovich. They're calling my father to this. My father goes, it's all, but they just with his head. He's pointing to someone in the back of the shul. He said, not me. Who is that? Who is Mr. Hanovich? Mr. Hanovich was your proverbial simple yid. He was a hairdresser. He gave a barber, a hairdresser. There was a barber. He walked out of his house. And he was a yid from Romania. They first settled in Perth, and they moved to Melbourne, eked out a simple living. He had one child, Moishe, in our class. And Mr. Hanovich, a real simple Baal Shemska Jew, sat in the back of the shul, quiet, humble man. And my father said, give him the aliyah. So the Gabbis, Mr. Hanovich, it's a mistake. No, Mr. Hanovich. And he's called up and given the aliyah. That was the story. And he writes this to his father. This moment of, and so finished, unbeknownst to Levi Weinberg, his father took the whole letter, which is a long report about the activities that he and his fellow students had done in Melbourne over the course of that Yom Tov season, and gave it to the Rebbe. And this is one little paragraph and the whole thing, and the rest of it is all about their accomplishment, the numbers of people they reached out to, the shiurim, how many Jews blessed Lulav on the Lulav and Esrei. And it was a 6 or 10 page letter. And then the letter comes out back to Rabbi Weinberg. The Rebbe circled of the whole letter, that story, just that little story, and wrote back, thank you for the tremendous nachas you gave me. If I'm not mistaken, you used an expression like water on a parched soul. All the great things that they wrote about, they did, and there was no comment on this story of that my father had given the aliyah to Mr. Hanovich. This that ever singled out as the nachas from the whole account, which is kind of similar to the story we're telling here, that Avos Yisrael and good midas, a giving and sensitive disposition, that is the ultimate avodah. All right, friends.